Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into a really noticeable shift happening in international education.
That's right. We're looking at where Chinese students are choosing to study.
And specifically, why the United States seems to be, well, attracting fewer of them than it used to.
Yeah, the numbers are quite interesting. Our source material for this is a recent article from The Economist,
Right.
and it really digs into the figures, explores the reasons people are citing, and touches on what the implications might be down the line.
So our mission here is basically to walk you through the source, pull out the key insights.
hmm
We want to get a handle on the factors at play, at least according to the article, and, what it could all mean.
And the article jumps right in, actually.
Yeah.
It mentions some recent news about U.S. visas,
Ah, yeah, I saw that bit.
but it stresses this trend, this decline in appeal for the U.S. Well, it was already happening before that.
Okay, so it's not just a sudden reaction to one policy change.
Exactly. Not sudden at all. The core trend the article points to is pretty clear. The number of Chinese students in America, it peaked back in 2019-20,
And how many was that, roughly?
around 372,000, a huge number.
Wow, yeah. That's a massive presence on U.S. campuses.
It really was. But then, things like China's own COVID restrictions played a part, and the number fell sharply.
And hasn't recovered.
The article says it hasn't bounced back. For the 2023-24 year, the figure was down to roughly 277,000.
So that's quite a drop, a sustained one.
Definitely. And you have to remember, for a long time, studying abroad, especially in the U.S., was seen as this golden ticket for many in China.
Right. The article brings up that term, haggi.
Yes, hagiwi. It's interesting. It literally means sea turtles.
Sea turtles.
Yeah, but it sounds like the phrase for returning from across the sea. It's the nickname, for Chinese folks to study overseas and then head back home.
And historically, being a haggi was a big deal.
Oh, yeah. It often meant you could settle abroad if you wanted, or come back to China for a really good job, a prestigious position.
The article even gives some high-profile examples, doesn't it? Like President Xi Jinping's daughter at Harvard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or mentions party officials doing mid-career programs in the U.S., studying modern governance. It was like a known path for getting ahead.
But now, The Economist's analysis, looking at its sources, suggests things are changing. Several factors are making the U.S. look less appealing.
Okay, let's get into those then. What are the main drivers, according to the article, why this shift?
Well, one thing that's definitely coloring perceptions is U.S. visa policy.
Right.
The source mentions a particularly tough week for Chinese students recently. This was after a State Department announcement, end of May.
May 28th, yeah. And the announcement talked about aggressively revoking visas.
That word aggressively really stands out. Sounds quite confrontational.
It does. And the article notes that language. It says the targets are students in what the U.S. calls critical fields.
Which means mostly science and engineering, stuff seen as strategic for China.
Pretty much. And also people with what the article calls unspecified connections to the Communist Party.
Okay, so the takeaway in the article is that this kind of policy environment makes going to America feel like what was the phrase? A dicey proposition?
Exactly, a dicey proposition. It just introduces this level of uncertainty, maybe risk, that wasn't there before or wasn't as widely felt.
And that's on top of the cost, right?
Mhm.
American universities aren't cheap.
Not at all. That's always been true. A U.S. education is a huge investment.
But the article connects this to what's happening in China's economy.
Yeah, it suggests that middle-class families there are feeling less able, maybe less willing, to foot that bill right now.
Because of the economic downturn. Property market issues.
Exactly. Things are tighter, so families are looking at this massive cost, plus the new visa worries, and, well, the article says many parents are concluding it's just too expensive and too risky.
The return on investment doesn't seem as certain anymore.
That seems to be the calculation, yeah.
Makes sense. If it's costly and risky, you look elsewhere. Does the article talk about alternatives? Are students finding good options in other countries?
Oh, absolutely. The source suggests that a lot of what U.S. universities offer, high-quality education, can actually be found elsewhere now.
And other places are becoming more popular.
Definitely. Britain is mentioned specifically.
Ah, the UK.
Yeah, the article says Britain hosted nearly 150,000 Chinese students in 2023-24, often seen as, well, cheaper than the U.S.
Cheaper, okay. But not just Britain, right?
No, not just the UK. More students are going to places in Asia.
Like Hong Kong, Singapore.
Precisely. Those spots and others in Asia, they're often perceived as maybe friendlier, less politically tense perhaps.
And crucially.
Crucially, classes are often taught in English. So no language barrier or less of one. Japan also saw a jump up to 115,000 Chinese students in 2023, from under 100,000 in 2019.
So the alternatives are definitely there in attracting students.
They are. It's a wider field now.
Okay, so options are expanding. The U.S. looks maybe riskier, more expensive. But what about when students do graduate? Is that overseas degree still the career advantage it once was back in China?
That's another key point in the article. According to its reporting, the ROI, the return on investment for that overseas degree, it's diminishing in China's current job market.
Which they describe as
Grim. That's the word used. Grim job market.
wow.
And an interviewee, a tutor, mentions that lots of the companies that used to eagerly hire Hegedis, foreign consulting firms, big law firms, many have shrunk their China operations.
Ah, okay. So the classic landing spots for these graduates aren't as plentiful.
Seems that way. And the article introduces a student, Mr. Lei, studying economics. His perspective is quite revealing.
What's his goal?
His dream, he says, is a stable job back home, like in the government or a state-owned company. Secure jobs.
Okay.
But he notes that those kinds of employers, the really stable ones, they can actually be suspicious now of graduates who studied overseas.
Suspicious? How so? What does the source say about that?
Well, it gives a really striking quote from Dong Mingsu. She's the chairwoman of Gree Electric, a huge appliance maker.
And she says,
She's quoted saying her company doesn't hire Hegi, flat out, just in case they were recruited as spies while they were abroad.
wow, that's incredibly blunt.
It is, and it adds this whole other layer of potential risk or maybe even stigma to studying overseas, at least if you want certain careers back in China. That's the picture the article paints.
So it's not just about the job market being tough, it's potentially about how you're perceived by some employers.
Exactly. Political or security concerns seem to be creaking in,
Yeah.
impacting the value of that foreign degree in some sectors.
And then there's the other side of this coin. The article talks about China's own universities getting better, right? Especially in science and tech.
Yes, this is presented as a really big factor. A major pull for students to stay home. China's top universities. They're climbing the global rankings, becoming much more competitive. Very attractive options, especially for STEM fields.
Science, tech, engineering, math.
Right. The article quotes a biology PhD student. He's at Tsinghua University.
Which is ranked really high globally.
Yeah, 20th by QS.
Yeah.
And he says he believes China can catch up, maybe even surpass America. Just needs time.
And he pointed to his professors as evidence.
He did, said his older professors, mostly U.S. educated, but the younger ones, increasingly educated right there in China.
That's a telling anecdote.
It really illustrates the point the article's making about the growing strength and confidence in domestic higher education. Peking University, another top one, is ranked 14th globally.
Okay, so putting it all together, you've got external pushes away for the U.S., visa issues, the cost, other countries looking good, and internal pulls towards staying home. A tough job market where foreign degrees might even be viewed suspiciously by some, plus genuinely improving Chinese universities, especially in key fields.
That's a good summary of the factors laid out. And based on all this, The Economist includes a prediction from Julian Fisher of Venture Education.
And what does he reckon?
He thinks this trend might soon mean a drop in the total number of Chinese students studying overseas. Not just fewer going to the U.S., but fewer going abroad overall.
A total fall globally. That would be huge. Why does he think that, according to the article?
Two main reasons cited. First, China's low birth rate. Just fewer students coming through the system in future generations. Demographics.
Right. Fewer young people overall.
And second, he notes parents of younger kids are increasingly choosing the domestic education track right from the start, instead of, say, international schools that were often feeders for universities abroad.
So it's demographics plus a strategic shift by parents reacting to this changing landscape. Fisher uses strong language for this, doesn't he? A time bomb.
It's the analogy in the article, yeah. A time bomb ticking in the international education system, especially for universities and colleges around the world that have become really dependent on the money from Chinese students.
Tuition fees, living expenses.
All of it. The article suggests this trend is going to cause major financial headaches for those institutions.
Yeah, I can see that. If your business model relies heavily on one source of students, and that source starts shrinking, serious challenge.
Definitely.
But what about the students in China now? How do they feel? The article includes some voices from students choosing to study domestically.
It does offer a couple of perspectives. There's a Mr. Lai. He's a master's student at Beihang University researching satellite propulsion.
High-tech field.
Very. And he says he actually understands the U.S. stance on students in these sensitive programs. The article points out that Beihang graduates in certain areas have faced U.S. study bans since 2020. Why? Because of the university's reported links to China's military.
Okay, so he gets the U.S. concern, but he sees an upside, a silver lining.
He does, according to the article. His take is that the really impressive students, the ones who might have gone abroad before, well, now they'll stay in China.
And that boosts domestic R&D.
Exactly. He sees it as an influx of talent that will help China's own research and development efforts. And there's another doctoral researcher quoted, Mr. Zhang. He has a similarly pragmatic view.
What's his take?
Mr. Zhang basically says, look, we can't control what the U.S. does. His attitude is pretty much, so long as we're developing well, then everything is an opportunity.
Turning a challenge into an internal opportunity.
Yeah, it's this viewpoint that kind of reframes the external pressures as a catalyst for China's own growth, its self-reliance.
That's a really powerful thread coming from those student interviews in the article, the sense of maybe resilience, a focus on building things up domestically despite these outside forces.
It definitely highlights a shift in mindset, perhaps, among some students and researchers in China today, at least as reported in this source.
So let's wrap up this deep dive into The Economist's piece. We've seen this mix of factors reportedly driving fewer Chinese students to the U.S. You've got visa hurdles and uncertainty.
Right, the cost factor, especially with China's economy slowing.
Plus, the rise of appealing alternatives, Britain, other places in Asia.
And then back in China, a tougher job market where that foreign degree might not shine as brightly, maybe even faces suspicion in some areas.
And crucially, China's own top universities are getting stronger, particularly in those critical STEM fields, pulling talent to stay home.
Exactly. And the article suggests all these trends, mixed with demographics and parents choosing differently, could mean fewer Chinese students heading overseas overall soon.
Leading to that time bomb scenario for international institutions that rely on their tuition fees.
That's the potential impact highlighted.
What this really shows is just how interconnected everything is. Geopolitics, economics, university rankings, individual choices, all feeding into this global flow of talent.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how changes in policy or perceived value in one major country can ripple outwards, and also how it reflects the growing capabilities and maybe changing priorities within another.
Absolutely. So as you think about this reported shift, based on this article, it's worth considering what it all means, not just for the universities, worried about budgets, but maybe more broadly. What does it mean for the global landscape of innovation, of scientific research, especially in fields like engineering and AI? If the response, as some students cited suggest, is a doubling down on domestic R&D with the talent that might otherwise have gone overseas, well, that feels like a question with consequences far beyond university admission numbers.